Good afternoon, this is Sean Golding with Golding & Golding. The topic of today's conversation is to discuss the new OVDP versus the IRS Streamlined Offshore Filing Procedures. So the OVDP is an acronym that stands for Offshore Voluntary Disclosure Program. That program was an offshoot of traditional voluntary disclosure. Excuse me. That program, the OVDP, was initiated in 2009. It went through different versions. In 2018, they closed the program. In 2019, the IRS issued a memoranda which expanded the traditional voluntary disclosure program. During the time that OVDP was around, if you had offshore-related matters, you would go through OVDP, you'd get a better deal if there was a more set penalty. Under the new version of the traditional voluntary disclosure program, whether you have offshore or domestic, it all goes through the same process using the same forms, etc. So under the new version of the traditional voluntary disclosure program, the program has changed with respect to the penalty on taxes due, penalties on information returns. So why don't we go through the basics before moving on to the comparison with the Streamlined program. So under the new version of the traditional voluntary disclosure program, and so two terms you'll hear a lot with experienced practitioners. Traditional voluntary disclosure is just the voluntary disclosure that has been on the books forever. New OVDP doesn't refer to a new OVDP program. It refers to the updated version of the traditional voluntary disclosure program, which is a mouthful. Saying new OVDP is just easier. So under the new version, or under new OVDP, the penalty goes like this. Well, let's compare it to the old OVDP, where it was a straight 27.5% penalty on the unreported assets, accounts, and investments, or 50% if there was a bad bank involved or a foreign financial facilitator that was considered bad. Under the new version of the program, the memorandum directs the agents and examiners to go through the Internal Revenue Manual and the code and base it on that. And basically what that says is for FBARs, first, it's a 50% max value on the aggregate total of unreported accounts or $100,000, whichever is higher. So basically what that means is $100,000 is the floor. Now the agents, the assigned agent that you work with, sometimes they can mitigate the penalties. They can reduce or minimize them depending on the facts and circumstances. Presumably, depending on the total value of the penalty and the facts involved, they'll probably need some authority from the supervisor or the manager, but it can be done. There's no set penalty. There's no specific opt-out procedure like there was under the old OVDP. Quick side note, when you see $100,000 for the willful penalty, that adjusts with inflation. It goes up. It's at like 125 or 130,000 now. So if you see that number changes, they don't necessarily change it in the statute. They'll just note that it adjusts with inflation. Another important point about the new OVDP is that if you don't have significantly high FBAR balance, then, and the main issue is information returns, under the new version of the OVDP, the IRS memorandum basically says, hey, we don't have a specific set penalty in place for the information returns. So maybe you have a 3520A or for a foreign trust, or a 5471 for a foreign corporation, or an 8865 for a foreign partnership, or any other form. You don't automatically get hit with the same penalty that you would under the prior OVDP, where it was all just kind of lumped together. So for some taxpayers, it may be a much better deal than even the old OVDP was. So there's one other penalty. It's a 75% penalty on the highest year's unreported income tax liability. So if you keep the number simple, assuming it was $50,000 of unreported income for each year in the 6-year compliance period, and they got hit with a 30% tax liability each year, so what's that, 15,000? You pick one year, forgetting that in my example, they're all the same, but you pick the one highest year and you multiply it by 75%. Under the prior version of OVDP, it was 20% per year for the 8-year compliance period. So that's OVDP. If you can qualify as non-willful, and we'll get to that in a minute, then you'd probably consider the Streamlined program. Under the old OVDP, there was a streamlined version, but it wasn't a standalone like it was now. In 2014, the IRS developed the Streamlined Filing Compliance Procedures. Those are broken down further into the Streamlined Domestic Offshore Procedures and the Streamlined Foreign Offshore Procedures. Both of those procedures refer to unreported offshore income, assets, accounts, or investments. It's just with Streamlined Domestic, the taxpayer is not a foreign resident. Streamlined Foreign, the taxpayer is a foreign resident. Quick side note, the IRS uses terms like offshore, foreign, international interchangeably. Offshore doesn't mean anything negative. It doesn't mean you've got money sitting in a tax haven. It's just the term or the phraseology that they use. We've prepared other presentations specifically on each Streamlined program, but the basics, you have to be non-willful for either program. Streamlined Domestic, you have to file timely tax returns. Timely is up for debate as to what that means. If your tax returns are due April 15th and you filed them April 1st, you're fine. If you filed for an extension to October and you filed them September 1st, you're fine. If they're late, you gotta either speak with an agent directly. They're not going to give you any confirmation orally. You'd probably have to do a PLR or something like that. But we've spoken with agents informally on various issues, and it seems like if you're a few weeks late and you have a reason for that, you may still be able to get into the program. If you're filing it 6 months, a year, 2 years late, probably not. Under the Streamlined Domestic program, you pay a 5% penalty on the highest year's aggregated total of unreported accounts and assets. The Streamlined Foreign is a better deal if you qualify, but you have to meet the foreign residence test. The test is different depending on whether you're a legal permanent resident / green card holder or a U.S. citizen versus if you're a foreign national, non-citizen, non-resident, maybe like a visa holder. It's based more on substantial presence tests, whereas citizenship and permanent residence is based on days out of the country. Practice pointer, days out of the country, you may qualify for the foreign earned income exclusion, which has a 330-day test, but the 330-day test under the Streamlined Foreign is different. If you qualify for Streamlined Foreign, there's no penalty, so it's a great program if you qualify. So the main difference in deciding, do I go Streamlined, do I go OVDP, is willfulness. And willful versus non-willful is a huge issue, primarily because the IRS has not developed a bright line test to analyze non-willful. It is basically a totality of the circumstance test. In addition, to complicate it further, willful in the civil arena does not mean intent. So when you hear the word willful in everyday life, criminal, it refers to intent, but that's not the requirement for civil. For civil offshore related penalties and non-offshore, it doesn't have to be intent. So there could be something called reckless disregard, where there's no specific intent, or willful blindness, where there's no actual knowledge, and you can still be considered willful and still get hit with those major penalties. So when it's time to compare OVDP versus Streamlined, it's important to speak with an experienced practitioner. Generally, they'll be board certified, they'll be dual licensed, they'll have a master's in tax, they've been doing this for a while. There's a lot of nuances to be aware of. Do your research online. If you want some more research, if you want some more information, we have tons of free resources on our main site, which is goldinglawyers.com. We have a sister site devoted exclusively to the Streamlined Procedures. It's called IRSstreamlinedprocedures.com. I hope this was informative. Thank you for your time. Enjoy the rest of your day.